So the first question is on populism and the EU elections, that current surveys and opinion polls suggest that populism on both ends are actually seeing an overall increase, so that there is an increase of support not just for right-wing populist groups but also for the Liberals and the Greens. So how do you predict it is going to pan out in the coming elections? And apart from a lack of stability for the centre, what else do you think it means?
Okay, a very interesting first question that I was actually not expecting. So I think that your question equates the Greens and the Liberals with populism, and I'm not sure that that is how I would define populist parties. So if we see populist parties as sort of, parties that make this explicit distinction between us the people and them the corrupt elite, and they do so in a sort of, will of the people and against the corrupt elites kind of way, I would not put the Greens and the Liberals in that category. I would talk more about the far right or the populist far right, which are parties that combine that type of populism with nationalism. And then I would also talk about the populist, the far left, which have a sort of more redistributive justice kind of materialist concerns sort of policies. So in that respect, I would answer your question by saying that it is the far right variety that we are seeing experience quite a surge in the polls at the moment in a series of countries.
Okay. That is interesting, because my next question would be then about the Brexit. Because of the Brexit, there has been a surge in pro-EU campaigns during the EU elections. So how would you contrast that with this contradictory element of the rise in the right wing as well as rise in aversion to EU skeptics as well?
Another really interesting question. So first, in the UK, what we witnessed is after the Brexit referendum, obviously UKIP declined. And you could say that the reasons behind that are that, essentially the mainstream parties co-opted Brexit, so people didn't need to vote for UKIP anymore. If they wanted Brexit, they could go to the Tories, they could go to Labour. Now we are seeing Farage's Brexit party actually do quite well in the polls, and that's probably got a lot to do with the Conservatives being related to some failure of actually implementing Brexit. Now, how does that translate to the rest of the EU? I think that the major effect that Brexit has had on these parties, the far right parties, is that they are now softer Euroscepts, if you like. They no longer so obviously talk about exit, but they try to talk about changing Europe from within. And this is sort of the narrative that we're seeing in many of their manifestos.
Okay, fantastic. And so to end this very short interview, one final question. Which are the areas do you think that will have the most direct policy impact with the rise of right-wing populism in the EU elections?
Thank you for that question. It's my favorite because I think in one word the answer is immigration. Immigration has become the most salient issue. I think people are focusing on the cultural effects of immigration, saying, people are worried about the loss of national identity or the erosion of national values. But I think there's also an economic dimension to that. People seeing immigrants as competitors to the labour market and access to various collective goods of the state. So I think what we are seeing, even without the actual surge in the polls for far right, what we're also seeing is that they're driving party competition, right? So centre-left parties and centre-right parties are now saying we need to imitate the far right in terms of immigration policy. The only way to defeat them is to become them. So I think that the danger posed by the far right is not simply that they will get a lot of votes, but also the extent to which they're able to drive other parties to co-opt their policies.
Thank you so much for doing this once again.
Thank
This was
you.
very enlightening. Thank you.